everybody. Welcome back to the Criterion Corner. This is episode 6 of this series already. Can you believe it? We've done 5 of these, and we are on number 6, and this is a very special episode for you. You came to me about 3 episodes back and was like, I don't care what we do for these ones, but for number 6, I have my pick. Mm-hmm. So this is Connor's pick this time. He was adamant that we do this movie for number 6. And what are we talking about, sir?
We are talking about Stanley Kubrick's third feature film from 1956. It is The Killing.
You might say, wow, why number 6, Connor? Oh, is it Spine number 6? No, that was Beauty and the Beast, which we did first. That was our very first one, so we blew that. Why do you want Spine number 575 as number 6?
So 6 is my lucky number.
Okay.
And
pure just superstition then.
Pure childish, I want it.
It's not superstitious.
It's a little stitious. We did it.
The Killing.
So
Michael Scott not in The Killing, unfortunately.
So I think it actually would have been, this movie would be a 10 if he wasn't.
Oh, sharing your opinion early.
But so this is pretty much the model heist film pre.
Yes, I didn't know that.
Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's 11, I would say. Pretty much every heist movie for the next 50 years after this is just The Killing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and now that I've seen it, I agree with that. And you never hear about this movie. Why does no one ever talk about this Kubrick movie? This is his third movie? No one ever talks about this. This is a great Kubrick movie.
Yeah, so the plot of this, if you're unfamiliar, please, I would encourage you all to go and watch it if this synopsis sounds appealing to you. Mm-hmm. What we have is an adaptation of the pulp novel Clean Break by Lionel White. This is directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Kubrick, co-written by pulp novelist Jim Thompson, famous for The Killer Inside Me, amongst many, many other pulp works. Very experimental and kind of form-pushing in that regard. But the credit is screenplay by Stanley Kubrick, dialogue by Jim Thompson. The plot follows a criminal known as Johnny Clay, and he is planning the biggest heist in sports history because he is trying to rob a horse track. That, of course, was much more popular a form of sport and entertainment and gambling back in the 50s when this was made. And if you like Christopher Nolan, if you like Quentin Tarantino, like Reservoir Dogs, The Dark Knight, Edgar Wright films, like if you like
Oceans, any heist movie,
a lot of those are taking their cues from this. And basically Johnny Clay is enlisting the help of a bartender, a crooked cop, a teller, and a landlord to do this job, to split it with them. And he is also enlisting the help of a wrestler and another,
who's amazing.
And he's also enlisting the help of 2 other hoods to perform certain definite tasks at certain definite times. But one of the men who is involved, the bookie, he has a wife who is a bit
just an absolute scumbag.
She is the femme fatale of this film, and because she is married to a little man who always wants to prove how tough he is, that might be the undoing. The cast here, of course, includes the great Sterling Hayden as Johnny Clay. Colleen Gray is there for a few scenes. Vince Edwards. Marie Windsor is probably the scene stealer, but there is also Elisha Cook Jr., just a murderer's row of character actors from the 40s and 50s that Kubrick hired because he watched everything. But DJ, why don't you talk about what you like about The Killing, or if you liked it, or what you thought about The Killing?
Yeah, and we should mention it is 1956. I know you mentioned the actors from the 40s and 50s. 1956, I did not know, I hadn't seen a Kubrick movie that went this far back. I loved 2001. I loved Dr. Strangelove, but this is the earliest Kubrick film I've seen. Mm-hmm. And I gotta say, it did not seem like my thing. I'm not the biggest heist, or I'm not the biggest crime film in general. And I haven't seen that many noirs. Like I said, I just saw The Third Man recently and loved it. So there are some examples, but it didn't seem like my thing when you honestly when you mentioned it like I think it was the end of last year. You were already like number 6. You got to do The Killing. I was like, okay, but then you got it for me for Christmas. This was given to me. It's like, oh, that was lovely. So I'm not mad I wasn't mad that we were doing it, but I was a little worried. I was especially worried that I wouldn't like it after you bought it for me. It's like, oh great, now he bought me this movie, and if I don't like it, it's gonna be really awkward. But I did like it. It was lovely. When it first started, and we were just kind of jumping around to like all kinds of different characters, and we didn't really have a focal point. I was like, oh no, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this. But like you said, as soon as we get to the scene with the femme fatale character, which is a hilarious scene, and she just kind of steals the show for a little bit, and then as I got to know the other characters more, they were all great too, and I was invested. It was great.
I'm glad to hear that. I know that I should probably just put my cards on the table. This is my favorite Kubrick film. It's not his best movie, but obviously something like 2001 or Clockwork Orange or whatever. Like there's so many movies he made that he just drops it on the screen and you're like, whoa. Like there's just so much quality there. This is the movie of his that I go back to constantly. I watched this at the perfect age when I was 16, the summer right before my junior year of high school started. And it was one of those things where I first became aware that, like, your favorite filmmakers are influenced by older movies. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time I saw the movie that clearly influenced movies that I liked. And that pretty much started my love affair of looking back to older movies to see origin points of tropes, structure, what have you. And so I do love this movie, and I've seen it probably 10 times, 10, 11 times. I've seen it a lot. Like I was sick with the COVID a few weeks back, a couple of months back maybe now. But and when I was sick, this was my go-to movie. I just put it on and watched all of the bonus features. Oh. It was great. So I don't know, where do you want to go with this?
Real quick, some things I thought of when you mentioned that. It reminds me, I know it's going to be a really weird comparison, but that's why the Criterion Collection is great, because it puts a lot of film firsts in the collection. And this reminded me, while you were speaking, of It Happened One Night. I had the exact same experience that you had with It Happened One Night, because I had watched a few rom-coms over the years with my wife, and It Happened One Night is just like every beat you can be like, oh, this is what every single movie is doing. And it's like, in that case, it was like, oh, this is what all those rom-coms are trying to do. But here it's like executed perfectly. And that's what I would say about this too. I think like this is executed perfectly for like what kind of story it is. Same way I feel about The Third Man. Like for the story it's telling, for what he's trying to do, it's like just flawless.
So this movie is a procedural. It is very much, this is what is happening. You have a narrator, and I wanted to ask you what you thought of the narrator, because for a lot of people, that's the element that they want to just be cut. They like the movie overall, but that dates it. They don't like the choice. It feels out of place. And I think I've learned that just in general, people don't like voiceover narration in movies. When the Batman did it, I know people were kind of like, even if they liked it or they didn't like it, they were a little surprised by the choice and were maybe pensive at first, which is never something I've had, but it's definitely something you notice when you watch this movie.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I absolutely had that. That was one of the things, along with like the disorienting nature of the first couple scenes, that I was like, oh, I'm not gonna like this, because it is the most dry, like deadpan. I was like, wait, is this how all noirs are? Because I haven't seen a lot of noirs, so I was like, maybe that's a staple. It did grow on me though. It didn't bother me all the way throughout. The one problem I do have is though, like, for the beginning it's helpful for like exposition, but at a certain point, all he's saying is the time of day, and that could easily just be on the bottom of the screen with a little subtitle. He's like, it is now 7:30 a.m. And that's all he says. And then he keeps popping in to tell you, like, it's the next day and stuff. Like, nowadays we would just put that at the bottom, obviously.
Right.
So that was a little disorienting and jarring, but I know that was kind of, you know, how things were done back then. So it didn't take me out totally. It's not as throughout as I thought it was going to be from the beginning. Because from the beginning, it's like he opens every scene for the first few scenes. But then he kind of goes away. And then when the heist starts, he starts giving us the timestamps and stuff. So
right. He really comes in just saying the time of day when the heist is about to get started, when Johnny is like going to the different locations, dropping off specific items, and like the scenes are only like a minute, 45 seconds. What was interesting is, so the essay in this...
Yeah, I'll show off the disc while you're getting that open. It is a gorgeous disc with the, spoiler alert, hopefully you've already watched it, but this won't tell you anything. It is the horseshoe on the disc, and then the disc art on the inside is the firing range target, which is a crazy scene. That guy's a character.
Yes.
And you've got the wraparound, all black and white, obviously. Looks really cool.
Kind of has that pencil sketch look.
That looks like the Third Man and the Citizen Kane Blu-rays.
So the essay in this is called Kubrick's Clockwork. It is by Hayden Guest. And it's a very good read. A little maybe overwritten places, a few adjectives I wouldn't have used myself, but it is very observant, and it makes a lot of neat connections between several of the elements, particularly in looking at this film as a starting point for a lot of what Kubrick would go on to do. Now, Kubrick's kind of notorious for his coldness, and there is a level of coldness here. And I think that what
I would say
Guest actually says is that the voiceover is the coldest aspect of it.
Yeah.
Where it is very, like you said, monotone, very dry. But what he does is actually observe something that, and I've seen this movie so many times, never thought about, but once he pointed it out, like, it makes everything look so much more, like, I don't know how I missed it. So you have this narrator explaining all of the points that are happening. It's basically being a color commentator. And then you get to the heist, and the person who is, over the loudspeaker saying what is happening, he almost takes on the role of the narrator, because they need to be listening to the loudspeaker to know their cues in the heist. And it suggests that the movie is almost sort of framing the heist as its own horse race. And
interesting.
I thought that was a really neat way of looking at it. And then the sort of visual component that Guest observes in his essay is that when we meet a lot of these characters, the way the sets are designed is it is one room next to one room next to one room, and you have a character walking a straight line from one room to the next, and it almost looks like somebody is on their track, in their lane, so to speak.
Wow.
I don't know, I thought that was very neat, very observant, and it sort of makes the whole thing kind of tie together in a sort of linchpin way.
Yeah, I definitely like to read that. I've only seen it the one time, so I'm not obviously picking up on all of that stuff. I do think it's interesting that I enjoyed it as much as I did, because I usually don't enjoy movies where the characters are all completely cold, kind of like they are in this. But I think it's just you get wrapped up in the craft of this one so much, and the editing is so quick, and you just want to know what's happening. You want to know what's going to happen, so you're kind of on the edge of your seat. And there's humor. There is still humor, even though they're cold. That's where the humor comes from. Especially the married couple. She talks to him like absolute garbage. She's the worst, but it's funny. She's the worst, but she's kind of the best part of the movie too.
Yeah,
she's hilarious. But yeah, I definitely agree with that.
You were talking about the humor. I'm glad you brought this up, because I think the dialogue here is kind of the secret weapon of this movie.
Yeah.
I think Billy Wilder is pretty well, I think one of the people who helped establish sort of rapid fire dialogue, but I know Howard Hawks with stuff like Bringing a Baby also established that in terms of how fast people are talking, and that's where a lot of humor comes from in a lot of early screwball comedies.
Philadelphia Story, is so fast.
And this is kind of written with that same thing in mind, where there is a humor to the way people they're speaking very cleverly, but they're also speaking super quickly.
You got to get into a rhythm.
Yes.
It's very, I think, modern day, we would compare it to Aaron Sorkin, where like people don't really talk like this. People would need time to think these witty things, but it's a movie, so they just rattle back and forth.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm not an Aaron Sorkin fan, and usually rapid fire dialogue, I don't like it. And that's honestly the reason why one of the main reasons I don't like Bringing Up Baby is because it's so old, and like the sound mix is what it is. Like, I can't understand what they're saying half the time. But it's for some reason it works for me here, and I love so many lines of dialogue. It makes me want to like this kind of line delivery and screenwriting approach, but I think it is because I can just get on its rhythm so easily. But then also, particularly when you're watching the heist, the dialogue takes a back seat, and it just lets the visual storytelling kind of take away. And like you were talking about with the editing, the editing gets pretty fast. It takes on that rhythm from the dialogue, because those dialogue scenes are very long takes, and then moving from that point on, it is the dialogue, the delivery of the dialogue, and the scenes that are primarily visually driven, and they are on that same rhythm, and that makes it, I think, feel so cohesive. And I'm speaking this out loud for the first time, but you saying that made me, I'm realizing maybe what it is that I'm liking about this.
Verbal processors here. That's why we do these discussion videos and not just like written reviews, because both of us come up with our thoughts on a film as we talk it out. So I will mention that, speaking of the humor and the dialogue, we watched this with my wife, because we didn't even mention he's in person. We always do these over Skype, because he lives, a bazillion miles away. But he came to visit. He's staying with me this week. So we watched this in my living room with my wife, and she was laughing a bunch. we were all laughing. I could see you just joyous over there like a kid in a candy store, because I didn't know at the time this is one of your favorite movies. You didn't tell me till afterwards, I think, that you had seen it like
I think times. So, yeah.
And but I could tell just by looking at the goofy grin on your face.
And we did have margaritas.
Yeah, you had your first. He had several margaritas, drank them very fast, so we were all in a good mood, and it turned out to be great. Didn't have any problem following it, so I mean that's high praise. It's a heist movie that you can follow even when you're a little tipsy. So
yeah.
What do you, speaking of being hard to follow, how do you feel about the nonlinear storytelling at the end?
This is where my mind got blown. Now, I did not know what Rashomon was yet when I watched this movie. So I know Rashomon predates this by a few years. I think that is also the 50s. That's Akira Kurosawa. I know that when they were pitching this movie to studios, they were using Rashomon as an example.
Oh, cool.
Citing that as an influence to maybe get people on board on what to maybe expect. They actually had trouble finding financing for this because of the way they wanted to approach it non-linearly. When I say they, I'm specifically talking about Stanley Kubrick and producer James Harris.
It says Harris and Kubrick right at the beginning.
Yes, and they were a pretty tight pair in terms of trying to get their movies made, because Harris, he liked movies and he wanted to be in the filmmaking business, but he just didn't know how to make them. And he trusted Kubrick, and Kubrick trusted him to help find financiers. And so they were a really solid team. And honestly, this release has a lot of not just The Killing, but just the Harris-Kubrick partnership that I found to be really kind of sweet, because there's like a 40-minute interview with James Harris just talking about their partnership in the 4 films they did together. And that's worth watching, I think. But they were actually cutting this movie, and they were writing it, and they tried writing it linearly, and then they stopped to try to make it more appealing to investors, and they stopped and they realized, well, this isn't what we found appealing in the source material. This isn't why we optioned the novel, like, to get the rights for this. Let's just not try to make it more appealing to investors. Let's just make it as is and see if there are any studios out there that do find it appealing, because it is a little different. And of course they got Jim Thompson on it, but the non-linearness. Now, I was the biggest Christopher Nolan fan in the world, circa 2012, 2011.
When you first saw this?
When I'm 20, yeah, when I'm 16 and I'm watching this for the first time. And, of course, he loves Kubrick and he loves non-linear storytelling. And it felt like I was sharing a brain with, like, baby Christopher Nolan, where I'm like, oh, I'm watching the thing he's watching. And that made me feel closer to this art that I really am finding to be grabbing me at a very impressionable age. And it's also making me want to go exploring other people that are separate from that artist, maybe other influences that person has. But I think the nonlinear approach is very cool because it's not a gimmick for the whole movie. It is just the logical, most procedurally, it's like systematically, it's the most systematic way you do it. You see it from this angle. So the movie plays out completely normally. Mm-hmm. And then once the heist starts, you see it from the wrestler's perspective. And then you see it from Nicky's perspective when he shoots. And then you see it from Johnny Clay's perspective when he's actually doing the heist.
Yeah, and it makes sense because all of these things are happening at the same time.
Yes.
So the only other way to do it is to, like, cut back and forth all these three different things that are happening, and that's just going to cut all the tension out of those scenes. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty brilliant.
They work very well as vignettes unto themselves, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. And this, I will say, this film doesn't do what I've seen in other heist films like Ocean's 11, where they don't explain the whole heist to you ahead of time. That we show the scene where he gets the wrestler. We know what he's going to do. We show the scene where it gets the I don't know what he is.
The horse shooter.
The horse shooter. But he hires that guy. But I don't think we get, like, a full breakdown of everything that's going to happen.
We don't. We see,
like, I didn't know he was going to throw on a clown mask and pull the gun out of a flower box. And we see him putting the gun in that box. We see how it gets there. But I didn't know exactly what he was going to do. I thought he was going to be just kind of the mastermind playing it safe. But no, he's in there, like, getting his hands dirty.
We don't know what Randy the cop is going to do. We just know he's in on it, but we don't know what he's going to do until after the heist has already taken place.
Exactly. See, that's what I like, because if you don't do it that way, what they do in, I think, Ocean's 11 is they do that scene where they explain what the entire heist is, but they intentionally, like, leave part of it out, so it is a surprise for the audience, which is kind of a cheat. But this film doesn't have to do that because he's never giving out that full game plan. You just see the scenes as they're playing out. I thought that was interesting because it was pretty surprising. I knew that there had to be a clown mask at some point with a gun because that's the cover, but I had completely forgotten about it. I was so into the movie that when that came up at the end, I was like, oh yeah, that's the cover of this film. And that was a great scene. Very suspenseful. We haven't mentioned the score at all. That is by Gerald Fried.
Yes.
And it's great.
Very percussive.
Yeah,
very
it's not
intense.
one that I would, like, listen to while I'm doing dishes or driving down the street, but it works perfectly for the scenes. And it reminded me a lot of the score from Creature from the Black Lagoon.
That was a good
like,
call.
Dun dun! Like it's like it gets your heart pumping, and it works really well. And
I'm glad you like the score because Gerald Fried, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I went with one or the other. I had a 50-50
go
shot.
For it. He does the score for a lot of early Kubrick films. He does it for Paths of Glory, which is a very good score. And then I don't know if he does it for Spartacus. But I think it's interesting when you look at the Harris-Kubrick partnership because it's not just Harris and Kubrick, it's the cinematographer, it's the composer, and it's like there's a tiny little knit group of these crew members that are kind of probably friends with each other, all trying to make it together. That's kind of endearing and I find very relatable to the stage in life that I'm in right now. Yeah. And so it's really nice to think that even Kubrick was one of those guys just trying to make it with a small group of friends that all wanted to do movies.
You got to network, man. That's what they told me in art school. Like, networking is more important than actually being a good artist. You got to get your name out there.
Absolutely.
And get those connections.
I want to ask you, what do you think of these characters? Because you had mentioned that they are pretty cold, but they do give you a window into them for, like, motivation. But did any of them in particular stand out to you? Obviously, Marie Windsor as Sherry Petey did, but anyone else?
Great, just because you love to hate her. and you hate that you're laughing. You hate that she's making you laugh because she's just horrible to her husband. And her husband stood out a bunch too.
Yes.
Like he had that character down. He nailed it. Like the weak, like emasculated man whose wife is always putting him down. He doesn't make enough money for her. He's not big and strong enough for her. Like he's just a little. She doesn't care about him at all. She's just with him for his money, and he's constantly just trying to impress her, and she doesn't care at all. She just wants money, and it's so sad. But gosh, it was like Captain America picking up Thor's hammer at the end of Endgame when he's like, "Where's the jerk?" And he goes, "The jerk's right here!" At the end, and he comes busting in, and like there's a big shootout at the end of the movie, and that guy, he has his moment.
He does.
He's not a wimp in that scene. He's snapped. He goes crazy, and it's hilarious. And I was so happy. And obviously his fate is not great, but that was such a great.
I'm glad you brought that up because there is a love triangle sort of happening in the margins of this movie as a subplot. So
really just at the beginning of the end.
It is, yeah, because you get about 3 scenes with Sherry kind of in a row, and then she goes away. Mm-hmm. And then, so she's seeing a guy named Val on the side, who looks like Oscar Isaac. He's of course played by, I believe it's Vince Edwards. Very good actor. I like him. I haven't seen him in anything else, but he's really good here as a sort of schmoozy,
just a jerk face.
Yeah, the hairy-armed, manly man.
Douchebag, so hairy. Good grief. Like,
but what I like is that you can sort of see. Now this is because I've seen like 11 times, but like you can see the history of George and Sherry in the back-to-back scenes of them when he arrives home and then when she goes to see Val, where she is very much just disinterested. He's almost like eating out of the palm of her hand because he is just like, she's just getting up and doing, like, getting her eyelashes on, going over here to do a task, going over there to do a task in their apartment.
Literally getting ready to go
see the
cheat
other
on
guy.
him
Yeah.
again, like she always does. And she's just like, get me a drink, and he's like toting on her.
He is constantly following her around. Great blocking. It tells a lot of that story. But she talks about it like, you can tell that he was probably a big talker, and he convinced her that he was going to hit it rich, and she believed him. And now she's stuck in this loveless marriage, and she's seeing another guy. But then when you see her with him, you see her become this simpering, like, oh, I called you 4 times last night, you didn't answer. And she starts following him around his apartment. And you can see that George was probably Val at one point in the way that he talked big because he's a little guy. Mm-hmm. And then he's probably 2-timing her and seeing someone else. And then what ends up becoming of this love triangle plot-wise that George spills enough to Sherry to make him sound like a big guy. And then Sherry goes to Val to be like, yo, George is in on a heist. Let's go take the money after they take it so that they do all the hard work and then we take all the money for it.
It's just the worst.
And so Val's going to go do that. But Val comes up with that idea and then uses Sherry to do his hard work. And so there's a really interesting like dynamic between, you can see the relationship.
Yeah, Val sends her straight into their place. Like he didn't care if she got absolutely murdered. Like, and they all suck.
But that's noir, baby. Everyone's a scuzzy dirtbag. And I will say, Val has a friend who's with him in a couple of scenes. He's played by the actor Joe Turkel. He doesn't have any lines. Who would later go on to play Lloyd the bartender in The Shining and Eldon Tyrell in Blade Runner, one of the best movies ever. Joe Turkel just died like a week ago. And so that's sad. And it was kind of nice that we actually got to watch this because we had already planned on watching this. And so I just wanted to throw his name out there because he does appear in this. And he doesn't have any lines, so it's not like he steals the scene.
The big shootout.
But he's here.
It's taken out by George on a rampage.
Yeah.
No, yeah, George definitely stood out to me. I'm trying to think of, I mean, the wrestler is very memorable in the fact that you couldn't understand anything he was saying.
I only know his dialogue because I looked it up on IMDb. Somebody was able to like phonetically figure out what he was saying because I've seen this movie so many times, I don't know what he's saying.
He has a very thick accent, but he was great. And we haven't really talked about how, even though this is very well thought out, everything kind of blows up in their face. Like,
yes.
Everything goes wrong. I mean, he was always intended to go to prison. He was fine with that, but like the horse shooter, that does not go well at all.
No.
And obviously the big ending, which I guess we can talk about if you have anything to say about it.
Oh, I have a lot to say about the ending. Before we get there, though,
Any more characters you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I wanted to mention Johnny Clay, because Johnny Clay is actually one of my favorite movie characters. Not for any particular reason.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of side characters, but like he's like the main.
So this is Sterling Hayden, who has a very interesting history in Hollywood. He hits it big because he is in The Asphalt Jungle, directed by John Huston, with Marilyn Monroe, which is another Criterion film that I have purchased and I will watch at some point.
Nice.
And his career is he starts big and then kind of fades out. He's in movies like Johnny Guitar with Joan Crawford, directed by Nicholas Ray. He's in this, but he's in like a lot of movies, but his star fades, and eventually he's in The Godfather, which is probably the movie most people would know him from as the cop that beats up Michael. But
I knew him from Dr. Strangelove.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the other big one, is he comes back in Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and he has nothing but really kind words to say for Stanley Kubrick, which, depending on what actor you're talking to, you get a different story on Kubrick as a director. But he has a very interesting career, and he just kind of did this movie just as a job, and he liked working on it because he liked the screenplay, but he's not that great of an actor. But I think he's like amazing. I love this guy because he has no range. He has like this really great voice, this deep voice. He's just really tall and really...
He's a presence.
He's big and tall and has a deep voice, and he reads the lines, and there's just something about his screen presence is he's a great character actor. Mm-hmm. He has a great face. He's got these like beady eyes that don't look mean. They just sort of look like childish almost. I don't know. I love him. And Johnny Clay is just to me just the textbook mastermind of a heist. So there's nothing inherently amazing about him, but I just like him as an archetype. And I think Sterling Hayden embodies that archetype perfectly.
Yeah. And his face, speaking of the ending at the end when it's just all falling to shambles and he's just like...
My most used gif is his like eyes slowly widening.
Oh, that dog, man.
So it sounds like you have something you want to say about the ending. So let's get into it.
No, I mean, I like when we used to do movies like this. It was kind of like... That was something I mentioned to you afterwards. It's like, I like how short and sweet movie endings used to be. Like, they thought of a good twist or a good hook, and they just played it out, and then the movie ends. Like, it wasn't like we had to have, like, 6 scenes following the character and, like, how he's, like, oh, now his life is ruined, or now he's in prison, or, like, there has to be all these epilogues and stuff. Like, it's just the gut punch, and then credits. And it's... I loved it. I mean, the ending makes it. I don't know if it would... I mean, I still really enjoyed it, but the ending was great. And it's a heist... Well... Full spoilers. Like, we're full into spoilers. Please go watch the movie. All of these videos that we do are spoiler laden. We hope you check out the movies before you sit down and listen to us talk about it, because that's what we're here doing. But I don't know. It's a heist movie where they completely fail.
Yeah.
And they get what they deserve. Like, we usually want to, especially in America, like, we usually want to, like, root for the bad guys. Mm-hmm. We want them to get away with it. We want to stick it to the man. And nope, it's just they all either, most of them die, and the one who actually gets away with it completely loses all the money. It's like it's interesting. It's an interesting feeling, because it's like I was torn, because it's like, yes, justice, but I kind of like these guys. And now this is all pointless. So
well,
it was like both.
I heard somebody once mention that there's something satisfying about watching people who are good at their jobs in movies. And Johnny Clay is good at his job. And you see him methodically. So there is that
He's put in the work, man. He has planned everything.
There's that inherent sympathy.
Yeah.
There's actually one of the monologues that the wrestler has that you can't understand unless you look up the IMDb, is he does talk about how the criminal and the artist are seen similar by the public eye to him, where there's almost like this desire to see their wings clipped at their most glorious moments, just to see them fail.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize he said that.
Yeah, and then he talks about there's like the metaphor of something that I can't remember. But there's stuff in here about that. And, there's this long-running... I'm not the person who came up with this distinction, but there's this observation that a lot of historians have made that heist films sort of feel like filmmakers being honest about their creative process. And it almost says something about the filmmaker and the way they work in terms of how the heist gets pulled off, because making a movie is a lot like pulling off a heist. It's almost like this impossible job to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's something here about, I don't know if this says anything about Kubrick, but I think it says something about young, scrappy filmmakers where it does feel like you could do everything right and it all fails. And there's almost something cathartic to the public that wants to see people who are like just lose. There's almost like we make memes about them.
Oh, especially nowadays.
Yes.
It holds up beautifully because like before movies even come out, people are like, oh, I can't wait for this to bomb. Like,
yeah.
I don't like that mindset.
So I guess I buried the lead. This is my favorite movie ending.
Wow. So you were with me that the ending makes it.
Yes, okay. Absolutely. This is, I think,
Thought
why...
I was offending you by saying that.
Oh, no. Speaking phrases of the killing will never offend me. So what I love about this ending is it is like, just the whole third act is dramatic irony, the movie. It is like, I think Rod Serling, I don't know if he ever saw this, but he would be proud of this. He'd be proud of Jim Thompson and Stanley Kubrick, because it is just payoff after payoff after payoff. When we first meet Johnny Clay and he's talking to Colleen Gray, he says, you gotta aim big, because like the biggest mistake I made before was shooting for peanuts, because they can put you away for a $10 job as much as they can for like a $10 million job. And so his motto is just go big.
2 million is what they go for.
They go, yeah,
which is a lot in the 50s.
It's crazy how much money. And the ending is he gets put away for a $2 million job, and he said it was they can do it. And what I like is that we get some backstory here.
It's so sad. Like when his girlfriend, is she his girlfriend or what?
Yeah.
She's like, they're coming, run, and he's just like, what's the point? Like, oh, his soul is crushed. Like, this is everything to him, and he didn't get it, so no point in living. Just lock me up.
There's a fun little line when he meets Joe Piano to get the motel.
Joe Piano, great character also.
Great little side character, where he mentions that he heard about Joe Piano because he roomed with some guy in Alcatraz. So Johnny Clay's business because he was in Alcatraz. And by the way, beautiful San Francisco cinematography in here.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up when you were talking about locked off shots, long shots, like long takes. They work because the cinematography is so good.
Yes.
Even though the camera's sitting still for a while, it's so interesting to look at.
Great set design and great blocking. Mm-hmm. I know that the cinematographer hated working with Kubrick on this, because Kubrick was basically telling him what to do. And because Kubrick, the last two films he had made, he was the cinematographer. Oh, and he comes from being a photographer before making movies.
Cinematographer Lucien Ballard.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, he did a good job.
Yeah, if he was just doing what he was told, which is the worst thing as an artist, to have someone else telling you what to do and how to do your job.
Oh my goodness, he went on to be the cinematographer for The Wild Bunch and True Grit. I had no idea. That's so cool.
Not a bad rap.
Yeah, but to get back to the ending,
soul crushing.
But before we get to like the big moment, there's also a wonderful payoff with Sherry and George, where the first time we meet them, they're talking about, I've got stomach pains. Maybe you have a hole in it. Well, how would I get a hole in my stomach? And she says, I don't know. How would you get a hole in your head? And it ends with, after the big shootout, he's got holes in his face. He drives to his apartment, gets out, and shoots her in the stomach. So he falls over dead with holes in his head. She falls over dead, hole in her stomach.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was just like blood splattered on him from the people he shot. But how do you get holes in your... It must have been like shrapnel, because they had like Tommy guns.
Yes.
So it must have been like shards that... Because you can't get shot in the face 3 times and just walk around. Like, it must have just been like ricochets that caught him. But it was a pretty gruesome shot for the 50s. Like, like blood trickling down his face and stuff.
They absolutely sold this on the violence.
Yeah, I mean, it's called The Killing, which is a great double entendre too. But I mean, you told me that they specifically had to change the name to The Killing to make it sound more violent.
Yes, the original title was Day of Violence, which I think is more generic than The Killing.
I actually like The Killing better than that.
I do too. But the tagline was violence, exclamation point, like violence like you haven't seen since Little Caesar and Scarface. Like, it was really selling the...
Funny because it's not. It's one scene.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they had to sell it on that, but like that kind of... Yeah, because I this is not what I was expecting. Like, it's...
What were you expecting?
I was expecting more of like that, like kind of like a gangster film. Because I didn't even know it was like just a heist film. Based on the cover, I thought it was, like a Scar. Not as... I didn't think it was as crazy as Scarface, but I thought it would be more... Maybe the original Scarface.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it'd be like that. Like, a gangster movie. But it's not. There's one shootout, and it is violent, like I said. But, yeah, I don't think that's the way to sell this movie.
So the ending, the big moment that's great is everyone's dead. And you have I think this is, like, probably the most necessary bit of information that the narrator gives us, is that they all agreed unanimously that if something goes wrong, then whoever has the money will just take it, and then it will be distributed at a later date. And because he has no idea that everyone's dead, he just sees George leave the scene with holes in his face and blood all over him. And he's like, all right, I'm out of here. He gets a suitcase. He finds the biggest suitcase he can find that's big and flimsy. He puts all of the money in it. They try checking the bag, or they try bringing the bag on. He meets his girlfriend. They try bringing the bag on as their personal item, and they say it's too big. They can only check it. And after much deliberation, they finally agree to just check it. A woman on the runway has this little purse dog.
This is why little yippy dogs are the worst. I've always, my wife and I call them yippy dogs. Our big 45-pound dog always used to hate him. He would bark his head off at him. We had an Australian Shepherd. Yippy dogs. It's just another reason not to get a yippy dog.
And look, guys,
it's not a dog, it's a rat.
I'm a dog guy. I love dogs. I love I love yippy dogs. The exception is this I hate this dog. So a plane is landing, the dog gets freaked out, jumps out of her arms, runs into the runway, and the little vehicle that the person is carting all the luggage on swerves to avoid the dog. The big suitcase is sitting on top because they were deliberating on it so long. It was the last thing they probably threw on top. And you see it fall over, and before it even hits the ground, all the money just starts flying everywhere.
And you left out a crucial detail. He bought it from like an old pawn shop, the suitcase, and the lock would not work. He's in a hurry. He just grabs it. He tries the lock on one side. It just flips back open. He tries on the other side. It just flips. The lock doesn't work. That's why he's so adamant that he has to take it with him, because he knows if anyone just opens it, they're gonna find it. He should have went back and tried to find another suitcase, man. He could have got a smaller one at least that locked.
Get your plane tickets for just 2 more days down the line. Oh, you just think about all those coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and I think as like people who partake in creative endeavor themselves, we can relate to that, right? Like,
oh yeah, I've definitely made stupid decisions, and I haven't been in that high pressure of a situation in my life.
I know, and what I like is that Johnny Clay at every point in the movie is so on it, and you can feel his power over everything. But even as time is running out, and I think it is largely due to the score, you can feel him losing his grip, even though he has got that face of stone and he seems like he's in charge of it. You can tell he's losing his grip and he's cutting corners now.
Yeah, because things are starting going crazy. Like they all got shot up. Like it's a big wrinkle in the plan.
Yeah.
But I like that. We talked about it's noir and they're all terrible people, but he's not. He didn't intend to. It's not like, oh, he's going to screw everyone and steal all the money.
No.
He was bringing it right to him. He didn't have to.
Yeah, he wanted to be a stand-up guy.
He was bringing them all their money, and it went sideways. I do think it's funny that the only one, the guy that seemed to have the most raw deal, he got paid the least, and he had to go to jail for like
60 days.
60 days. He ended up getting the best deal because he's the only one that either didn't die and he just got paid to do a job and he went on his way after 60 days. Yeah. Everyone else is either in jail or dead. So he made out like a bandit.
Yeah, let's talk about Nicky, the played by the character Tim Carey. So he's the
also
horse shooter.
A lanky, rubbery face kind of looking guy.
Yeah, with the wackiest teeth you've ever seen. This is very much an actor who is notorious, difficult to work with.
Oh, really?
Just a goofball. Yeah, apparently, like who he plays on the movie is
that kind of makes sense. Yeah. Just by looking at him, and the way he like delivers his lines, he kind of seems like annoying.
Every time I show somebody this movie and he starts talking, people go, "What?" Because he says every line like this. Oh, you really say that nice, Pops? He like talks through his teeth. He looks insane. Like
so
his first shot is he's got the gun. He's like, ah.
So he's basically the Jared Leto of the 1950s.
Well, he directed a film. He wrote, directed, starred, and produced this movie called The World's Greatest Sinner. Oh. And it was sort of this notorious sort of The Room of its era, like crazy movie that I cannot find anywhere. So if anybody watching this is a Tim Carey expert for whatever reason, please contact me, like write a comment, let me know where I can find The World's Greatest Sinner, because I gotta know.
Wow, he's in Paths of Glory. He's in East of Eden.
He is great in Paths of Glory, by the way. You should check that out.
Yeah, he was interesting whenever he was on screen, and you kind of were not upset when he got taken out.
No. Another example of wonderful irony.
Yeah. And the movie kind of goes out of... Well, I don't think it was going out of its way to like make him a terrible person by what he says to the usher. I think he was just trying to get him away
because
he needed to... The horse was coming and he's just like, let me say the worst thing I can to you so you leave me alone.
Yeah.
And I get this job done. I mean, when you're hired to be the guy who shoots the horse, you're not going to be a character anybody likes. So
right.
You might as well steer into the skid and just be as annoying as possible.
By the way, the introduction, so there are so many great lines in this movie.
Yeah, I imagine that if I had seen it as many times as you, then I would be quoting this a lot with you. It seems very quotable.
There are a ton of great quotes. My favorite is where he is talking to Nicky, trying to convince him to be in on the heist. And I like that we only get these scenes of him trying to convince him to be in on the heist after he's already told the other guys he already got him. So it sort of foreshadows his
confidence,
his confidence, but maybe also
arrogance.
Yeah, the arrogance and why he would be willing to go for a suitcase where the locks don't fit.
Yeah, he thinks everything. I imagine him being the kind of guy. Well, maybe not because he was in Alcatraz, but even still, I think he's absolutely the kind of guy where everything just kind of goes right for him in life. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of serial killers have that. Like I know Ted Bundy, and where he was just like, he was really handsome and he was just used to people just like giving him exactly what he wanted, and he had that confidence because the life had always gone well for him. And even though he was in Alcatraz, he got out and seems to be doing fine.
Yeah. He says, oh, and one more thing. Suppose by accident you do get picked up. What have you done? You shot a horse. It isn't first-degree murder. In fact, it isn't even murder. In fact, I don't know what it is. But the chances are the best they could get you on would be inciting a riot or shooting horses out of season or something like that. I long for the day I can write a line of dialogue as amazing as that. It's so good.
Shooting horses out of seasons. Yeah, he is great. And you say he's kind of like dull and monotone, but I buy that he talks both of those guys into that scene. Mm-hmm. Like when the guy's like, why don't you just get like some rascal or whatever? What does he call him?
You could get any hoodlum for like $10.
Yeah, hoodlum, what a great word.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't need a hoodlum. The hoodlum's gonna get taken out. I need someone who can. And it turned out to be true. He needed someone who could take out like 10 cops because they kept coming, and he was just throwing them. I love that scene. It's so funny.
When I showed that to a buddy of mine, he lost his mind at that scene. He's like, what? And he says this movie needs to get remade for the sole purpose of getting Dave Bautista in that role.
It's like,
I can see it.
If you've seen Mighty Joe Young, which you need to see,
I do.
There is a scene where he calls up like 10 strongmen on stage, and like one of them like bends a bar, and one of them like rips a phone book, and they're like doing all these strongmen feats before he brings out Joe to like thrash them all. And this character in this movie looks like one of those like straight out of that performance. Like he's one of those strong men. He's huge. He's got bald, shaved head. He's got hair all over the place. He's like,
that's
don't
awesome.
They call him like a gorilla man at some point?
I don't know. He does look very.
He's great. I loved every time he was on screen.
Yeah, I would say I love this movie. It does. There's one aspect of it I don't like, and that's in the introduction to Johnny Clay, we're met to Faye, his girlfriend, played by Colleen Gray, I'll just say this much. I think that's the worst scene of the movie.
I didn't even remember her when she came back at the end. I was like, has she been in this movie so far? Like, so that scene did not stick with me.
Yeah. See, the scene is really awkward because he's like basically just saying like all these people are not criminals in the usual sense. They're all people who work every ordinary day lives, and maybe that's why he's going to get them, is because they do have some kind of stake in, you know, they're desperate, but they seem like decent people, and so that's why he's maybe like able to convince them, and maybe why he trusts them more than a hoodlum, as you know he says later. But she's talking to him and she says, "Oh, Johnny, I'll go along with whatever you say. I always have since when we were kids. Oh, when you were locked in there all those years, it's not like you were locked in, but I was locked out." Just the worst dialogue they put in her mouth. And then it's like he says, "All right, baby, go and get out of the movie." And I'm sitting here like, thank you. And that is no shade thrown at Colleen Gray, who is a wonderful character actress. You just got Nightmare Alley at the Criterion sale.
I did.
She is great in that movie. You saw the remake. She plays the Rooney Mara role.
Oh, awesome.
In that.
Can't wait to check it out.
She is like beautiful and angelic and naive and innocent, but also a little more streetwise than she lets on in that. She's great. So I love seeing movies where The Killing alums show up. Even if you're my least favorite character in The Killing, I was still excited to see her show up in Nightmare Alley, even though that was made well before The Killing.
Now that you say that, I do remember that scene, and that was one. It was really early on, and I was like, "Oh no, is it all gonna sound like this? I hope not, because I'm not digging this scene."
But then you get the best character. Like I think, just in an academic sense, Sherry is the best character. Her dialogue is just wonderful.
Yeah.
I saw something sweet today. A candy bar, George? No, Sherry, not a candy bar.
She's so demeaning and condescending. And
I could talk about this forever. There are so many wonderful little moments. Were there any little things that stuck out to you that you maybe wanted to mention?
No, I think I covered everything. Like I said, it hit me a lot harder than I was expecting it to. It's not my preferred genre usually, but I think it was just so well executed. I was not expecting as much suspense as happened. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. That really kept me invested the whole time.
I would agree. It once the ball really gets rolling, it gets captivating. And something about just seeing a job come together is inherently
satisfying.
Yeah, and you want to watch it happen. I don't know. There's something cool about that I just think is working in the movie's favor right off the bat.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for showing it to me.
Thanks. I'm glad you liked it.
Thanks for choosing it. That's what these videos have always been. I think most of these have been me picking something for you to watch, you picking something for me to watch. A couple of them have been totally new to both of us, which is good too. I love doing it both ways as long as I'm seeing new movies. I love this series that we do because it forces me to check out new things and things that I might not normally check out, which is great.
I'm glad I saw Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. That's definitely getting me out of my comfort zone.
Diabolique is way out of my wheelhouse, and I absolutely loved it. I don't think we've had a dud yet.
No. So
they've been great.
I'm glad you liked it as much as you did.
I really did. So let us know what you think about this movie in the comments. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sticking with us on this series. This is not our most popular series, but I think we get the most enjoyment out of it, though, because I love discussing movies. Yeah. I love collecting movies, don't get me wrong, and I love talking about movies that I'm adding to my collection, but I also want to discuss the films themselves at some point. And I have a blast doing these, and we're going to try to commit to doing this monthly, I think. I
feel like that is kind of the general angle that we've both kind of been going for, but I would say monthly would be a lot of fun to do. We should make a point to do that.
Yeah, we're going to try to get one of these out monthly because we really enjoy it, and I know a few of you are there with us. We love these videos, and if you do, please leave a comment because we love talking to you guys about these movies. And some of your comments have led to the choices that we make in these movies. Like you mentioned, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday was directly from you guys, and that's why we watched it. So let us know if there are any films in the collection that you want us to check out or you think we would really like, because we will definitely take your recommendations because there's so many movies in the collection. It's very overwhelming. We both have a lot of them in our collections already. So sometimes it's just like, I don't know what to pick. We've got so much.
Right.
And we could use a little guidance because it just makes our lives a little bit easier. But thanks for coming in person. Had a great time talking about this movie with you. Thanks for showing it to me. Once again, it's The Killing from 1956. Great film. I hope you've already seen it at this point, but if you haven't, check it out, even though we've completely ruined it.
And if one perk of getting this is one of the bonus features is it includes Killer's Kiss, which is Kubrick's prior film, his second feature-length film, his first collaboration with Harris, and I like that movie.
Yeah.
It's another film noir. Again, not quite what you would expect with like gangsters. It's about a boxer who kind of falls in love, and the woman he falls for is involved in like a gangster, with a gangster. But it's pretty good. It's not The Killing, but I like it.
Sweet. I always love when they include full films as a bonus feature.
Yeah.
That's very nice. So that is The Killing. Another Criterion Corner in the books. Leave a comment, subscribe if you like these videos, and we will be back with another one real soon. See you guys.